And I'm really happy you're here. The discussion about buoyancy control is something that I find so effective. So in terms of those of you who I can see, put your hand up if you're doing any kind of fitness training or strengthening or vertical aquatic training is what I call it. Whether you're doing it with patients or whether you're doing it with other public groups, put your hand up if you're doing that kind of work. Okay, so if you don't have your hand up, are you doing more therapeutic kind of work? You're a therapist in the pool with people, or you're maybe just interested for yourself? Interested for yourself, don't have a hand, can't find my arm. There we go. Okay, so I just wanted to get an idea. I think whether you're a therapist who's working more one-on-one with people who are rehabilitating and getting back to their new normal, whatever their new life will bring, or whether you're someone who's working with a whole component of fitness, group aqua fitness in your background, either way, I want this discussion to be meaningful to you, and I hope I can maybe get you thinking about things a little differently, or maybe using some of the stuff you already know because it kind of reminds you that you want to do that. So really the training I'm talking about could be oriented to therapeutic work. It could be oriented toward group fitness work, but what I'm talking about is vertical aquatic exercise in the water. So rather than flat out and floating, rather than horizontal kinds of things, I'm thinking about working vertically, working functionally. And then I think about buoyancy and how we control the way that impacts our body and the kind of work we're trying to do with people. So there's where I'm coming from. Krista Fairbrother will let you in, and I'm going to screen share right now, so bear with me for just a second, and I will do that. Desktop share. Yep, there we go. Open preferences, and there we go. Zoom us. Okay, so this tells me I have to quit to do this. Hopefully it doesn't. It means I have to leave the meeting and come right back in. Can we do that? It won't let me screen share without leaving to allow Zoom us. This is what we should have tried in our couple of minutes ahead of time.
Okay. All right. Okay. As soon as I see you, I'll let you back in.
Okay. So let me see if I don't think I can share yet. So let me try again. Maybe it will then. Oh,
there you go.
Yay. So it wasn't, it said it was going to be more difficult than that, but there we go. I like it when things work. Okay, so here's what I'm thinking about today, and do feel free to clap up your hand or voice a question if you wish, because this is informal as far as I'm concerned, and just a chance to talk about some ideas. So force of buoyancy is wonderful, as we all know, as mermaids and mermen and water people, in that it really, when you're counteracting gravity, what can be better than that? We have another whole planet we can go to that has different gravitational forces and allows us to feel and work differently. So the other thing that really is always in the back of my mind is that body composition affects how buoyancy affects our body. And of course, our body composition morphs and changes a little throughout our lives, but our own buoyancy experience is unique. So just like we can all say we see the color pink when we look at something, how do you see pink? How do I see pink? How does my brain process that? My body and my brain is unique. And in the case of buoyancy, my bone density, my muscular mass, my fat deposition sites, and my knowledge of how to move and stabilize in the water is unique to me. So that is part of what's always going in my mind when I'm thinking about helping people to determine how they're going to use buoyancy to their benefit. So it's a powerful tool, I think, if we use it, and I think it's very mind-body. So I will be coming back to the idea that I love Ruth's concept of heavy, and it's taking some of this buoyancy work and even pushing it a little farther in terms of your conscious control of how the water is affecting your movement, your stability, and your body in the water. So when I think of the benefits of buoyancy control, again, I'm talking about vertical exercise, vertical movement, vertical training in the water, which whether you're therapeutic or group fitness oriented, it applies to you equally. So I really want to think about how can clients engage with buoyancy control when they have floor contact, but what also can I do with buoyancy control if I don't have floor contact? And we'll get to that toward the end of what I'm talking about, and certainly welcome your ability to share your experiences with that. So this is a very generalized little cartoon I've drawn. And of course, we know that depending on body composition and gender, so how our bone mass and our muscle mass is oriented, it'll be somewhat different for men and women. Different age groups will have different bone density. So this is just a very broad brush approach to, this is what I tell my clients when I have them in the water. So if you're standing neck deep, you've only got 10% of your body weight acting on you, essentially the weight of your head. If you're chest deep, you've lost 75% of your weight. So I ask them to do a little mental math and then figure out how much they actually weigh now in the water at this depth. And then waist deep. So if we're reintroducing gravity to people following things like joint replacement surgery, this is a wonderful tool and so good for them to know. There was an Australian study that I saw a number of years ago. It's quite an old study, but they did some really interesting stuff where they had an above ground pool and they had a ground force measurement tool under the bottom of the pool. So here was the pool water. There was the pool liner, and under that they had stuck a force plate. And then they had the pool filled at various depths, and they were measuring what the reaction forces were, what the impact forces were with people working in various depths of water. And I thought that was, first of all, it was a really brilliant study. I thought that was really fun. But secondly, what blew me away is that if you're in kind of knee-deep water and you're running, your impact forces are higher than if you're on land. And that kind of blew me away. I thought, isn't that interesting? I never would have thought of that. But so if somebody thinks, well, I'll run on the beach in the waves or whatever, I've got a wading pool and I'll do some running in there, you actually have higher impact forces than if you were just in gravity. And I think it's because you're pulling out against the, the suction of the water, if you like, and then you're pounding down into it. So that surprised me. But it's interesting for people to think about that and also to use those numbers to, and us as therapists and movement motivators, we can use these numbers to structure how we work with people and what's going to be best for them where they're at. So here's some of the issues we deal with working with anybody in the water. If you're trying to suspend somebody like the guy on the left, really tough. I train lifeguards how to be aqua fitness leaders. That's part of my work. And you get these, 18-year-old football players who are all bone and muscle, and try to float them vertically to do aquatic exercise. They'll end up with two belts on or a belt and riding a noodle. And, they look like the Michelin Man by the time you get them in the water, but you have to find something that will help them pass the T-test. So we actually have a little, structured learning exercise for them in terms of how much flotation do you need? And without arm movement, they're all swimmers, they're great swimmers. So no, your arms are still, your legs are still, you are vertically hanging in the water. If you can breathe out and breathe in without the water coming above your paddle, then, you're good. You pass the T-test. And we all know that we work with some people who don't need a belt to pass the T-test. So you might stand them in shoulder deep water, say, skull as you need to, and when you can, keep your arms still. Bend one knee, taking that foot off the floor, bend the second knee, taking that foot off the floor, and help them stabilize if we need to, but can you breathe out and breathe in without going below the surface of the water with your mouth? If that's the case, you pass the T-test. So there will be some people, I have new instructors saying all the time, what do I do with somebody who's so big around the middle that I can't find a belt to fit them? And then I say, well, have you tried the T-test with them? If they pass the T-test without a belt, they don't need a belt. So that's a great tool for especially people who are newer to helping clients in the water to figure out, where do I draw the line? How do I say, well, you have to put a belt on because our rule is you have to put a belt on. And in some cases, a belt is a hindrance. They don't need one. And you would be working hard to find one that went around their middle. If they have that much adiposity, they don't need a belt in most cases. They will float. They just have to learn how to stabilize in the water and understand that their body will be fine that way. The guy in the middle is kind of your average person, whatever average means. And so the typical flotation devices will work well for that person if you're doing suspended or deep water exercise. And then we've got our guy on the right, and there's the person who wouldn't need the belt to pass the T-test. But the problem they have is when we try to do chest deep or shoulder deep exercise, they often can't ground. They can't get the feet back down. So you're maybe teaching them something like a pendulum or a rocking horse or whatever as part of their training, maybe hip work that they're doing, or in a fitness setting. The foot comes up and their whole body takes off, and they're the ones who can really, tip over easily and lose control and need to know how to do full recovery in the water, because it's likely something they're going to have to deal with along the way, and we're going to have to help them figure that out. I've posted it here, and maybe I can put it in the chat later on so you have it. I've written just a little blog article on pros and cons of different kinds of flotation. So if you want to just think about that again, I'll make sure you have the link for that. Here's a piece of flotation that I designed. I wanted something very simple. I wanted pelvic flotation, which is what that is. So the belt is not pelvic flotation, that's around your waist. If you ride a noodle, like you're riding a horse, then that is pelvic flotation. There was a woman who designed a flotation device. I think she called it the water horse. I really liked it. I used it, and I thought, I want something like that, but I want it simpler. I want it simpler to make, cheaper to ship, all of that stuff, and also something you can alter. Because the water horse, as much as I loved it, all the flotation pieces that were put into it were sewn into place. So all you could do is buy a different variation of it to get flotation that was different. This that I have designed is so simple. It's being made by our friend Craig Stewart. Steph knows him very well. And what it is you're putting noodle pieces essentially into little channels front and back. And the beautiful thing about that is that you can alter the flotation very easily by taking out some noodle pieces. So you might have somebody, for example, who almost passes the T-test. They almost do, but they're riding a little bit low in the water when they breathe out. So I can use a wave rider with them. HydroFit in the USA sells it, and they call it their water saddle. So I could take out some pieces. I could take out the bottom piece front and back. I have some people who will only use one piece, one noodle piece front and back. And of course, you can change the length and the density of the noodle pieces depending on what you have available to you. So I like that it's inexpensive to produce, easy for people to alter it to fit their own specific needs. If you've got huge floaty breasts or a huge floaty bum, you might change front to back how many pieces you put in there. And I know Speedo over the years has had some belts, for example, where you could put in more flotation or less flotation. Again, I prefer pelvic flotation to a belt when we can use it because belts restrict breathing. And actually, this water saddle is more stable because you've got buoyancy front and back, both sides of the torso, whereas the belt, depending on how it is and how your buoyancy is, it can be tippy for some people. In fact, a lot of belts, all the water jogging belts are designed to tip you forward at about 15 degrees. And then they get used in Aquafit, and people are constantly having to fight them. So they may have to wear them front to back. And frankly, if you tie it up tightly so that it doesn't ride up and become a push-up bra, if you do that, then you will have trouble breathing. It is. You're going to have pressure on the diaphragm and restriction around the base of the rib cage. So that's a little bit about flotation, but like I said, I wrote a blog article where I sort of talked about it in a little bit more detail if that interests you, or you want to direct a client toward it. So if we think about buoyancy options in chest deep water, we're using floor contact through these. We could also suspend, and then it's not, then I call that deep or suspended as a separate category. But if we're thinking about chest deep water, chest to shoulder, the options that I define are light bounce. So light bounce we've all seen. That's what people do. And if you get them in a pool and you ask them to march or ski or do hamstring curls or jacks, that's what they will naturally do if you don't teach them something different. They'll be bobbing along. You know, the heads will be going up and down. If you watch aqua fitness videos online, you will see people bobbing around in the water. And that's natural. That's what we would naturally do with the force of buoyancy. And we just kind of bounce off the floor, and then buoyancy brings us up again and we bounce off the floor. And so if you have a lot of personal buoyancy just as part of your body structure, you're going to bounce higher and longer than the person next to you. So even if you choose to do light bounce, you know, the timing of it will be different depending on the person's body composition and their awareness of how to control their own interaction with the force of buoyancy. Anchored, I love. So anchored is like the precursor to heavy. With anchored, the way we describe that is that you always have a foot in contact with the floor. So you might stand solidly on the floor with one foot and do a bicycle or a skateboard with the other foot, or do a leg raise, or whatever exercises you've designed for that one limb. You're staying anchored to the floor with one and you're moving the other. Or you could be standing with both feet solidly on the floor in whatever stance works for your goals, for the exercise goal. So if I have a wide stance, I'm very stable. If my feet are pretty much under my shoulders, it's a little more difficult to balance. If my feet are right together, it's even harder to balance. If I have one foot in front of the other, like I'm standing on a tightrope, even harder to balance, or stand on one leg and then do those activities with the upper body that will challenge my balance. So anchored, I love. Anchored means one foot or both feet are in contact with the pool floor and you're not bouncing. You're staying solid. Unweighted is another option that we use, and that is if I'm in chest deep water, I will bend knees and hips enough that I'm kind of more like shoulder deep. Or if I have the option, I can move to where I'm more like shoulder deep in the water. So unweighted means I will pick my feet up off the floor and gently touch the floor, but I'm not allowing bouncing to happen. So if I'm doing something like a jack, it will look like this under the water. The foot contact will be very light. So unweighted is lovely for people who don't want impact forces, but they want to move. And in some cases, you can't do anchored jack, for example, or anchored ski without ripping all the skin off your feet. So, you know, your pool floor doesn't allow it for whatever reason. So unweighted means I can do very gentle contact. I lift slightly. I'm not lifting a huge lift. That's another whole scenario. But I'm doing light contact on the floor. I'm controlling the contact, and I'm controlling my core, and I'm controlling the level of bounce that's happening. And I'm trying to keep it so that the bounce is not controlling me. I'm controlling the bounce. So very much a mind-body kind of engagement, and people have to learn how to do this, right? So like I said, if I put them into the pool and just ask them to move, they're going to typically light bounce. That's just what's going to happen naturally. Anchored, I'm really solidly hooked into the floor. Unweighted, I'm touching the floor lightly. Tell people, work like you're working on eggshells, like you don't want to break an egg. Gentle touch, gentle touch. So very low impact forces with unweighted, very good core control, and body awareness has developed to be able to have that work effectively for people. So it's good because they have to think about what they're doing. They have to think about about core control, and there's no impact, but their core is working harder than if they were doing light bounce. So when I tell people to think about how people can use their core as a stabilizer in the water, light bounce typically has the least amount of core control. Anchored has a lot, unweighted has a lot, with different loading between anchored and unweighted. Propulsive is I'm going to bound off the floor like a little bunny rabbit and get kind of as high as I can control and be comfortable with. So propulsive I tend to use with more athletic populations. It's good in the sense that I'm loading bones, but if I have a lot of arthritis in my load-bearing joints, I may not want to be loading bones. So my joints won't like it, right? So it's nice to have all those options. And we've just taken a session in the pool and given 4 gradations of how to make the core more engaged, how to make the mind more engaged, how to change the level of impact and loading that we have happening. And it's all in the same pool, like no special tools required, no equipment required. I don't have to worry about it. This all works, and it works really well. There's another little side story I want to share, and that is that I've heard people say, I've heard presenters say this at conferences, you can't hurt yourself in the water. How many of you agree with that statement? How many have hurt yourself in the water or know somebody who has? And I have to say, yes, yeah. So I never had shin splints in my life. I ran track in high school, not super jock, but on the volleyball team, running track, doing a lot of athletic things. And I never had shin splints in my life until I started going to Aquatic classes. And the instructors were doing a lot of light bounce and propulsive. They weren't using anything else for buoyancy options, just deep. And you are jumping on cement in bare feet. So if I were wearing athletic water shoes, I would have been fine, but I wasn't. And I had no idea that I could actually create this kind of problem in my body by just jumping around on the pool floor. And I did. The other big issue I see is with instructors who think they have to imitate light bounce when they're teaching on the deck. And I know that could be a real controversial discussion. Maybe that's another whole topic for another day. But I prefer to coach more, move less, teach people how to think about what they're doing, get them to move with great technique and great posture. And I'm not bouncing on deck as an instructor. I don't need to, I don't want to. And in fact, I'm teaching my participants not to. So it's a win-win. It's a win for instructors preventing their own personal injury. But it's not that your participants are losing because you're doing this. They're actually gaining. They're gaining more core control, more awareness of how they're moving their body and controlling their body in the water. Buoyancy options, I promised you some video. So here's some video. This is just a sequence of different videos where you will be able to see what the buoyancy options look like. So there's unweighted. That's actually a fairly shallow pool that I'm in there. Here's anchored in the big picture, light bounce in the inset picture. So anchored requires, especially with long levered movements like I'm doing there, requires a lot of core control. It ends up being a core exercise, flat out. So there's a rocking horse with light bounce, and it's pretty simple exercise. It's a nice one for people because it's a balance of knee lifting and heel lifting. So you're using structures on the front and the back of the hip, which is great. Here it is anchored. So if I do it anchored without any bouncing and I use big long levers with my arms, or as I'm actually having to do in this video, don't use your arms at all. And boy, is that hard. Anchored rocking horse with no arms. Cross your arms on your chest, put your hands on your hips and do it. Wow, what a core exercise, really tough. Here's a skate ski where we're going from a neutral position under the hip to pushing behind, and it's anchored. So that one foot is solidly in touch with the floor. I can teach this exercise with both feet staying on the floor. I could slide the back leg backward. And in fact, I like teaching it that way quite often because I really want gluteal engagement as that leg comes back. If people see me lifting the leg as I'm teaching it for them, they'll want to try to lift their leg. They'll think it's a leg lift exercise. So I teach it as a glute squeeze instead of a leg lift. And then it becomes more anchored, it takes out the bounce, and it really helps people focus on that core control and the hip muscle control. So here's my friend Tamara showing you the various buoyancy options we've talked about with just a march, just a plain marching exercise. So you notice there's no bouncing, she's doing an anchored march, and you really have to work to put the leg down, you know, depending on your personal body composition, but you're working both directions with that. There's light bounce. She's not having to work nearly as hard on core control or on the putting down of the leg, because you're kind of coming down in the water, and so you have to sort of force the leg down like you do with anchored. She's going to pick that up a little bit in a moment and go to propulsive. So there's what that is. And with propulsive, highly, highly recommend good cushioning footwear. If you took this a step farther, you'd be doing plyometrics. So you're really shooting out of the water like a trained dolphin with plyometrics, and that's very much a sport training. But this has more impact forces when she's doing this propulsive. And you can see that, right? You can see how the foot has to land. She also shifted there, and you may not have noticed that, but she had, because of the propulsive action, she had actually shifted herself up into shallower water and had to move herself back down deeper. So when you're doing propulsive things like that, people often can't orchestrate their landing as well as they'd like to. You know, they end up kind of not where they meant to be.
This is a brief selection.
And I'm just going to kill the audio on this. So this is just, again, another selection of little videos showing you anchored, and there is a little bit of light bounce or unweighted in here too. But when it's taught this way, when you're taught to anchor and unweight, everything you do becomes core control. Everything is about stabilizing your body, and we're hammering people constantly with power posture messages. So whether we're doing it visually or whether we're doing it verbally, we're cueing people to really stay long and strong, square and powerful, and then move your limbs with power, purpose, and range while you're maintaining that great core control and maintaining buoyancy control. And when you put the two together, it ends up being a very powerful training tool. I don't need to use equipment. Here's an anchored, both feet anchored, doing a matador, pulling vigorously through the water. My favorite exercise ever is reverse matador. So the back of the arm is going against the water. I'm using external rotators, extensors. It's great work for those underused muscles of the shoulder. So I'm going to move this on. When we think about deep water, I'll do this really quickly, and then maybe there's time for a question or two, or you can email me a question. So buoyancy torque, as we know, is off-putting the body a little bit, and when you get into deeper water, that becomes an issue. Or when you suspend, you might be shoulder deep water and you're taking your feet off the floor. So again, light bounce will happen there. You can anchor suspended work, and it's really tricky. So that is that you're going to minimize up and down forces with your arms and legs, and you're going to really emphasize the forward back or out in, but you're trying not to propel yourself. So next time you get a chance to be in deep water or suspended, I'd like you to try doing jet skis, whatever exercises that you might normally use, and try not having any bounce occur in your body at all. And it's tricky. You really got to think about it. The other one that I like in deep water is propulsive. And that's where I use propulsive more than anything, is if you're in deep water, I want you to get out of the water. And that is hard, hard work. You're not touching the floor. You're using the force of your arms and your legs to propel you upward. So that's another great training tool, which is, I use it for more athletic training. So, thoughts, questions? We don't have much time for discussion, but let me escape from here. And where am I? I'm going to stop share. There. Okay, so a moment for questions. We have like 1 minute, literally. And then if you want something else for me, you can email me. It's just my name at Mac Computers, mac.com. Let me see if I can put that in the chat, if I can put that link for you. And I haven't been looking at the chat, so I apologize for that. Right, yeah, the water saddle from HydroFit, or I call it a wave rider. It is wonderful for people with back pain. It works really, really well, and it doesn't restrict breathing, which is the other thing I really, really like about it. I'm just going to copy this link and put it into the chat. So if you do want to check out that blog, or if you have a client who might benefit from a discussion about buoyancy options, you can certainly direct them to the blog.
A quick question, if we have time. Hi. Hi. On the saddle, I notice again, like with different people, different buoyancy, like different amount of noodles that I put in there, and they love it. I just was wondering if there was certain populations that you work with that do better with that than others, but I've found that it's working really well with the back and hips.
Yes. In terms of, I guess what I'll take the flip side of the coin, and that is who wouldn't like it.
Yeah.
So in some cases, if people have really large thighs, they may find that they chafe a little bit with it. They can always do a turn in the center, and it's more thong-like at that point, so it's less likely to rub on their legs. I also get them to wear tights on their legs. Also, I've worked with some people with pelvic pain who don't like any kind of pressure on the underside of their body, on the vulva, on the yeah. So male or female, pelvic pain, it can be an issue for some people. Other than that, I use it for everybody. And sometimes, like for those real sinker people, you can put in longer, thicker noodles. You can also use it with a belt if they have to. If they just cannot be buoyed up, it's another tool in the toolkit to be able to help keep them buoyant enough to work in deep water.
They love
Other
it.
thoughts, questions? Anything new or different for you today? This is all just old stuff.
Hi, Connie, this is Linda. I thought it was an excellent review, and
Yes.
we get back in the pool next week. Loads more.
There you go. That's great. And I find too, sometimes it just reminds me of some stuff I haven't said to my clients for a while, or a little process I haven't taken people through to explore their training options a little bit more. So sometimes it's just a nudge. This is stuff you kind of know. Maybe there were a couple of tweaks on it that were a little different for you. Yep. I hope it was worthwhile either for, and sometimes just how somebody else says something can be a new way for you to present it to the people you work with, or a little different way that might click for somebody a little differently. I hope it does. So we have another message here in the chat. Will the screen share material be in the recording? I'm not sure. Ruthie, can you clarify, or Linda, you can tell us?
The PowerPoint and everything will be in the video. Only the chat will not be available in the video. So you will be able to see what was presented in the PowerPoint. So that will be in the video.
Yeah. Thanks, Monica.
Sure.
Excellent. I think we're out of time, everybody.
Yes,
Thank you so much for being here today. It was wonderful to see all your faces and have you with me. And I really appreciate you being here. So until next time.
Thank you, Connie.
Signing off from the show, girl.
Hey, girl.